You say in the book it was hard to be a Tsar. There's something quite poignant about that
Yes.
scene.
I mean, Russia was and is an incredibly difficult country to direct. I remember someone telling me who'd sat with Stalin in the 50s and sat at his Black Sea dacha, and Stalin said, after all I've done, I've taken Berlin, I've destroyed Hitler, all the terror, no one still obeys me, And of course, Putin felt that, and the Tsars felt that. Peter the Great, everyone was terrified of him, but he had to beat people literally to get them to do what he said.
Well, 6 of the last 12 Tsars were murdered.
It was a very dangerous
That's a very
job.
high ratio, isn't it?
Yes.
It makes the American presidency look like, a holiday.
Yes, 6 of the last 12, and killed in all sorts of different ways.
Tell me.
It was a very dangerous job. It was a very dangerous family to be living in. This is a family in which fathers killed their sons, sons killed their fathers, wives killed their husbands, and all of those happened in one century.
And yet there's this anomalous stability, 304 years. You're quite in awe of them, aren't you?
The system worked somehow, and this was because of the alliance between the Romanov family and the nobility and the military, really. And that was a sort of combination that worked extremely well. They built this colossal empire, and it was expanding eastwards to Siberia, westwards to Ukraine. The first century of the Romanov rule is spent conquering Ukraine and Crimea.
Russia was very different from the rest of Europe. The other countries had at least started experimenting with parliaments, with assemblies, but Russia was essentially medieval right up to the last second.
Well, what's amazing is they had this kind of very tiny group of the aristocracy at the top who all spoke French and German and bought English pictures as well, and were very European and incredibly refined. And then just underneath them, you had 90% of the population that were serfs, that were chattels, that were slaves. Serfdom is slavery. And that was the basis of Romanov's success, really, was this kind of slave army that meant the Russians could put men in the field cheaper than any other country. They barely fed them. There was a saying, look how the Russian soldier stands, even though his head has been knocked off.
But one of the things that Tolstoy goes on about is that there was a yearning in the upper echelons for change, even if it was only moderate or, shall we say, evolutionary rather than revolutionary change.
That's right. War and Peace really started as a biography of the Decembrists, the officers who had been to Paris with Alexander I in 1815 and 1814 and had seen Western Europe. And when they came back, they questioned the autocracy. And in 1825, they took the opportunity of Tsar Alexander's death to try to lead a rebellion, to create a parliamentary democracy in Russia, a constitutional democracy, which ended badly. They were executed, exiled to Siberia. And the new Tsar, Nicholas I, became one of the most conservative. For a while, he was the most successful statesman in Europe. He dominated Europe for 20 years. But then came the Crimean War, as we know.